Thank you, Christoph. Sometimes reach for my glasses. Can everybody hear me all right? This, I have to admit, is a very unfamiliar setting for me in the sense that most times I'm talking to architects, planners, engineers, sometimes artists, all of whom involved in what we call, I suppose, international development. And my own focus generally has been to try and find ways in which designers, which architects, engineers, all the professions, in fact, I no longer care what the disciplinary core is, make all those professions relevant to some of the big issues that we face out there. What used to be somebody else's problem. I always used to have, particularly with architects, there was a wonderful quote that went from one of my old colleagues: what a house does is probably as, if not more important than what it is. Now, what it is, as an architect, I do very well. I design it, I've got the technology of it, and so on. What it does is improve health, generate income, give you dignity, creates employment, and immediately my architect friend will say, no, that's somebody else's business, that's not my business. So my concern has been forever trying to engage many of the professions that I've been working with and teaching with in some of those strategic issues out there. And I'll just remind you that cities, at least in the countries that I work, in the developing countries that I work, account for something like, cities in the developing countries account for something like 95%. 1.4 billion of them over the next will be in slums, and they will be either inside 2030 vulnerable or otherwise. The question for me is, how do we engage with that? By 2030, you say, like 4 billion people such will live. How do we actually bring our services to bear in a way that is being in slums? And they will be either insecure. Let me tell you a little story that some of you I know. And the question for me is, because I want to, how do we engage with that, if I want to use that word, client group as such? How do we actually bring our services to bear in a way that is meaningful? Let me tell you a little story that some of you I know have heard, but bear with me because I want to then unravel it. And it's the story of a bus stop. I was working in a neighborhood, in fact it was in Sri Lanka a little while ago, and like we always do when we start off in our work, we try and search the community. I want that local organisation to engage with and work with. And so our tendency is always to try and find it, as it were. We usually make a couple of mistakes. The first mistake is we engage with those who have the loudest voice, and they may not be the most representative. The second mistake we architects always make is to turn fairly complex processes into things, because then I can design them. So, for example, if you say schools, if you say education, I say schools. Play, playgrounds. Housing, houses. And I broke them into mine. We made the same mistake in this case, talking about community. And I said, well, what we really need is a community centre. My colleague said, well, actually, there's one not far from here that they built, and it looks, to some people, very good, but hasn't worked. So I said, well, let's go and have a look at it. Let's go and see what's going on. And we went down there, and it looked pretty good to me. Nice building, new, something you could photograph, like we always like as architects. We went into the first room. It was pretty nice. It was one of these rooms that had a lot of these old Singer sewing machines lined up. And women were sewing clothes and doing all kinds of things. And I go, well, that's pretty good. We call this micro-enterprise. He said, I don't care what you call it, he said to me, this guy. He said, it actually has created an incredible division in the community between those who have the access to this service in the centre and those who would normally create employment through their own home bases. Not only that, the business of making clothes has been appropriated by men who now manage the program and market the clothes and so on. So there's a gender distortion going on there. So I go, well, okay, I get the point. We go into the next room, it's a childcare centre. It looks pretty nice, about 8 children playing around, backboards and games and everything else. I said, this looks fantastic. How can we say no to this? The guy said, well, actually, no, in our community, childcare has been networked and not a centre-based activity. It has been operated out of the front rooms of some of the old people, other friends, who only look after the children, but also take care of their integration into the community and so on. So actually, it's distorted, again, that business. And not only that, it's disadvantaged some of those who can make a lot of money out of it, through childcare protection and so on, and actually take it into the centre. And so it went on. I went to the clinic and the same sort of happens. And just as I walked away, I made one of those crazy comments that architects make. I went, I see your point. But actually, it looks nice, and it's a nice colour. It's painted blue. And the guy goes, no, actually, it's a very ugly colour. So the light blue represents the ethnic minority that controls us, and it has created incredible divisions in the community. And I don't like it. How many mistakes can one make in any one of those situations? I had noticed in many other parts of the areas what happens where the buses stop in some of the communities, the incredible activities that occur, the life that occurs around them, the cafes, the trading, the shops and so on. And so we thought to ourselves, why not negotiate with the bus company? It was a private bus company. The site was like this. There was a road that went around the site, the little road that peters into the middle and goes out again. Why don't we bring the road and the bus into the site, put a bus stop in the middle? There was already a well, water point there, and just see what happens. Now this was sounds very simple, but it was actually quite complex because this was a World Bank project, and World Bank don't usually like bus stops. At least they'd like to invest in slightly bigger programs. Anyway, we did that, and whilst the fish was usually the fishermen were men, but the fish was taken to market by women. Inevitably, the bus arrived every 2 hours. It was not like a 10-minute service. And if you're entrepreneurial, like most of the people are that I work with, you lay out a sheet on the ground, and whilst you're waiting for the bus, you sell fish. So over time, not very much time, a small market occurred. The town got known for being a place to get fresh fish, so people were coming in and going out and beginning to make connections and so on. We also broke the rule of putting, this was an upgrading project, of putting street lights every 100 meters or whatever it was, and clustered them around where the buses were, because mostly where these places are, there is very little electricity in the houses, and so children tend to do their homework outside under the street lights. So we thought that if we clustered them around where the buses are, it would provide a service in that way, with a few chairs and so on. And sure enough, the kids would come out, they would do their homework where the buses stop. And of course, you all know what happens where children are. The next thing that happens is the person with the ice cream van turns up, ice cream starts saying, and the guy with the toys and paper and pencils and so on, whole community merged. Then the guys around the bus stop thought to themselves, well, this is crazy. Using our houses in the way we do, why don't we open up the front room as a cafe or as a shop? And indeed that's what happened. And so shops and cafes emerged and the rest. And over a period of time, it became a thriving community centre. It did get its building in the end, but this was a recycling centre to turn old materials into products that could be sold. So it was a useful centre, but it also became a place for meeting. Now, what does the bus stop story tell us insofar as our activities are concerned? And I just want to unravel one or two key principles that have guided our work over the period of time. And the first is a very simple, very straightforward, and very common sense one. And that is that if you want to do something big, you start with something small and you start where it counts. In other words, you start with something that has immediate impact, but with a long-term strategic effect. Bus stop had a very practical agenda. It was getting the fish to market more easily for the women. But it had that longer-term strategic agenda, which of course had to do with building community and creating some sense of community in this particular neighborhood and connecting it to the remainder of the city. And there are lots of examples that I can give you of that, and many of you, I'm sure, will have wonderful examples. There was, for example, the Federation of the Water Tap Attendants. In most of the places I work, women and children look after the water tap. It's literally a standpipe. You know, if one wants to reinforce that, you create a small enterprise around it, you create another enterprise, another part of town, another part of town, another part of town, and then you federate these small water tap attendants into a community that elects representatives that then becomes a partner to the Water Authority. The Water Authority is delighted because it can't possibly service all the slums and shanties that we're talking about, and of course its income for the communities themselves. We had a program in Nepal, which was a program that tried to raise awareness of what happens after the floods, when the snakes come out, and all the bites and so on. And of course, the program was directed at children. You forget the adults, they're a complete waste of time. You work through the kids. And it was a professional theatre group that was operating and doing street theatre. And of course, behind all the kids were all the adults listening and so on. The practical agenda was how to protect yourself from snake bites after the floods. Our strategic agenda was much more of how you integrate environmental awareness back into schools and get the kids to teach the parents about environmental issues that have to do with water, sanitation, and what happens when it floods, as it were, and so in that sort of sense. Lots of one, for example, firefighting in Delhi, again, a service that was designed, it was a partnership between the local community and the firefighters, because the firefighters couldn't get their fire engines into the community. The streets were too narrow and so on. Again, a partnership between some of the men and the women who were organising water that would act to protect the community from fire should it occur. And then they became trainers in some of the houses to train people about how to reduce the risk of fire, because a lot of the cooking was done on open stoves in the houses and so on. Anyway, lots of examples of practical small steps that became much bigger with a little more help over time. We'll come back to that issue in a moment. The second lesson from the bus stop story is that we adopted an action science, or if you like, an action planning approach, where learning and doing go in parallel, not in sequence. I mean, I was taught, I don't know about you guys, first I have to finish my thinking, and when my thinking is finished, I can start doing. And we all know that that's absolute rubbish, because by the time you've finished your thinking, usually you run out of money to do anything. In Bangladesh, when I was working with UNDP, it was wonderful. That process of trying to sort out our thinking took 4 years, all the data collection and so on. By the time we got to that point, the data was out of date. Things had changed, so we went out and did a bit more thinking. It was very bad. We're taught first to know and then to act. With principles that I've been trying to talk about, small chain principles, you act, and by reflection, you know what Ron Sherman and my colleagues at MIT used to call reflective practice. Knowing in action, as it were, which I'll come back to in a second. And I like to capture that in kind of a comment that goes, don't think too much before you start doing, and don't do too much before you stop and think about it, because that can be equally instrumental and dangerous. Third, in the bus stop example, we reversed the usual planning sequence, which again follows the routine of survey. You make a survey, you gather data, you analyze the data, and it tells you something about the cost, the institutional capacity, and so on. You make a plan, and then you implement the plan. And again, that sequence could take a substantial amount of time. My view is that if you are interested, as we are in most of our cases, to unlock the resourcefulness of place, it demands that we change that linear process of planning in whatever we do. So in other words, you do something first, that doing tells you something about the larger plan that emerges, that of course has to be analysed in terms of its implications, that yes, you do have to go back and do the larger survey to look at some of the primary causes of the problems, that then links you back to more actions and so on, but the process is reversed. You start by doing something. I suppose, in summary, in that respect, and this is something that disturbs certainly the management crowd that I work with, the coherence of the plan is improvised. It emerges incrementally and in response to problems and opportunities as they arise. And they arise mostly, as we know, certainly in the places that I work, in fairly spontaneous and ad hoc fashion. My colleague once upon a time called that process of improvisation, he called it design hacking. And he has a nice interpretation of it. He says improvisation, I call it improvisation, he calls it design hacking. Hacking represents reciprocity between the user and the designer. While it complicates authorship and challenges the designer's instinct for control, hacking also breaks down barriers between design and people and yields significant benefits in the process. It creates new engagements between products and consumers. It mediates relevance of necessity in design. It creates abundance from very limited resources. Of course, most managers hate improvisation, because with improvisation, you don't actually know quite what's going to happen next, which we didn't at the bus stop. We wanted to to be in control, which is the way we're taught to be. Richard Sennett calls improvisation the user's art, a wonderfully creative way in which people work. The fourth key lesson from the bus stop story is that we learn to ask questions differently. And we tend to be not so good at that. We are talking mostly about us as architects. In other words, you reason backwards from what you do to what you're thinking about. Instead of saying, how can I build a community centre, the question became, how can we cultivate community in that particular case? Not, as is usual, with good intent, what is the most I can do to help and how quickly I can do it? No. My question always is, what is the least I need to do to get things going? And then what help can we provide on the way? A couple of really interesting examples in that. I was working in Chittagong in the southern part of Bangladesh in a community, and there was a real problem of getting the school bus in to get the kids to school. And so we were trying to figure out how to get the school bus in. And of course it meant widening the roads, it meant displacing people, it meant paving the roads, all the expense that went with that. Somebody at the back of the room put up their hand and went, why do we keep talking about getting the school bus in? Why can't we talk about getting the kids out? And that unlocked a completely different set of alternatives. We had bicycle rickshaw drivers that were only half employed. We had welders on site who welded, made kind of rickshaw cabinets and so on. We partnered up the rickshaw drivers with the education authority as school bus drivers. Carriages contained about 6 kids, about that could effectively be taken to the school. The kids painted the school bus, they put their names on it, they painted different colours. It was very personalised. They couldn't wait to get to school in the morning. And on Saturdays there used to be these school bus races on the public open space to see which school bus wins. Asking the question differently. My friends in maths have a different one. It was rather interesting. It opened up a very different field of research in mathematics. They came to me and went to this guy and went, what does 2 and 2 equal? Alright, I'll make it easy for you. What does 1 and 1 equal? 1 and 1 or 2 and 2 always, let me just say 2 and 2. 2 and 2 always equals 4. There can be no other answer. But what does 4 equal? Anything you like? 2.00, 300 plus 1.0, whatever you like. It opened up an entirely new field of mathematics. What I'm saying is that we have to learn to turn the question upside down and ask it differently. The fifth, and I think important lesson in all of this respect, is that we added the strategic agenda to our first practical intervention. Making practice strategic demands, from my point of view, at least the following considerations. First, inducing change. Change in our own professional conduct. We're always talking about change outside. Our own professional conduct as designers, as architects, as artists, where it's not just the expert that's seen as a special kind of person, but every person out there is also seen as a special kind of expert. And unless we believe that, then participation is only consultation. It's not real engagement. There's change in practice procedure, and all the participatory processes, all the engagement, the conflict resolution is part of that. There's the change that we induce when we intervene, and I'm talking about my own work. When we arrive, wherever we arrive, inevitably change is in the air, if only because I may represent an international authority or whatever. Sometimes, of course, I like to think about practice as disturbing the place that we intervene in. Sometimes we're invited to disturb. Sometimes we disturb inadvertently because we blunder in. And sometimes we disturb because of global requirements. There are changes that are required because of climate change, for example. We have to be aware of what it is that we're actually intervening to change. Then there's change that's integral to practice. The change is part of my process. And that's not what I was taught. I was taught as an architect that I would produce the product, whatever it was, the building. Once it was done, it was finished. There is no such thing as finished. There's a wonderful Egyptian adage when it gets translated that goes, when a house is finished, the family dies. In other words, there is no such thing as finished. And we know that. It's constantly evolving. Why do we always think of the built environment as something that is finished as such? And I always find it very interesting that when change is threatening, we adopt all kinds of defensive mechanisms. One of them, for example, is jargon, which we overly integrate to specialization. I saw on an architect's drawing once, something went, a node of interactive action. Anybody know what that is? The bus stop. But turning it into a node of interactive action made it a highly specialized piece of activity and so on. Simplification is another defensive mechanism. We reduce everything to its common denominator, particularly in housing, where we say, well, the average family wants this. Well, what the heck is the average family, as it were? So we deny the unique, we deny the differences, because differences and uniqueness is complicated, it's complex. We boil things down to common denominators. We also exclude anything that we don't understand. And certainly many of the communities that I work in, many of the non-literary communities, where many of the needs are sung to you or come over in theatre, we tend to say, well, if it can't be written down, it can't be of value. If you can't count it, it can't be worth anything. So we put it aside. And certainly, I would find it very difficult to take a small group to the World Bank and sit there and they sing their needs to the World Bank. It's very difficult. Adding strategic value means inducing change. It means crossing boundaries, boundaries between levels of organization, boundaries between disciplines, boundaries between knowledge and know-how. That's between thinking and doing. We've already said that. Becoming more strategic also means dealing with the primary causes of problems and not just the symptoms. We're very used to the symptoms of problems. The house is bad. Fine, I'll fix it. I'm an architect. It won't take me any time at all. The question is, why is it bad in the first place? And again, you very quickly get into, well, it's bad because people are excluded, there's poverty, there's no employment, ethnic differences, discrimination. That's not my business. I'm immediately out of that again. So again, what are the primary causes? And I like to, in my own discussions and surveys of places, I challenge everyone to walk around and follow the question. I see what I see very clearly. But what am I looking at? All right? I see the garbage in the street. That's easy to pick up and clean up. But what am I looking at? Nobody throws garbage in the street unless there's an issue there. Becoming strategic means managing constraints, and there are all kinds of constraints that always get in the way of our work. And I like to think of constraints as a context to our work that may have to be worked towards over a long period of time to disentangle, and constraints that are an actual barrier. Someone comes along to me and says, I've got a great proposal, it's a fantastic proposal I've written, but I can't do it until the government changes. And I go, well, that's not a good proposal. Yeah. So, constraints analysis, the way in which we manage, the way in which we partner up people that can open doors for us, becomes a really interactive participatory process. And then there's, of course, the strategic action of scaling up. Lots and lots of great small projects is fine, but how do we scale them up? And we're here talking not just about scaling up numbers. I did a wonderful house that can now do 20,000, if you don't believe in that. But scaling up ideas, scaling up methods, and importantly, scaling up impact. A small idea built into a small project can have a fantastic impact if we can begin to negotiate its place and its space politically and other ways. Finally, what does all this mean for us insofar as our own professional conduct? And I like to kind of think in terms of the fact that as designers, as architects, every time we intervene, there are, at least for me, 4 interrelated sets of responsibility and activity. And I call them providing, enabling, adapting, or changing, sustaining, my PEAS principles, P-E-A-S. When I wrote a book some time ago called Housing Without Houses, and in it I argued that we have to stop being providers and we have to be enablers. And I've now slightly changed my position on that. To be a good enabler, you have to be a prudent provider. We're always providing something, whether it's systems, whether it's money, whether it's information, whether it's knowledge, whether it's access to essential resources to make basic needs, all that interactive process. The question then becomes, how do we provide what we provide in order to enable people to provide for themselves? That's the question, right? Because if we provide too much, it becomes top-down, or it becomes just charity. And both of those are unsustainable. If we don't provide enough, it's not being enabled. There are all kinds of enablement processes. There's community enablement, which is about capacity building. There's political enablement, which is about voice. There's market enablement, which is the way in which we get the private sector into the process and so on. That's that duck again. Don't worry, I'm nearly finished. So, all kinds of enablement. The one that's interesting for us is, what does design mean as a process of enablement? Right? How do we cultivate an environment in architecture that is an architectural invitation, an architectural opportunity, rather than close things down, how do we open things up insofar as design is concerned? The A is about adaptability and change, if you like. How do we provide in order to enable so that we can continue to ensure a good fit between our environment and the needs of the people who occupy it? In other words, that if we are to ensure sustainability of the built environment, that we have to make places fit for change in order that they can change. And of course, the last responsibility is how do we sustain it all? How do we keep going? I love to collect street signs when I'm in various places because they tell a lot about the aspirations of the place and about people as well. So there was one that was wonderful about head shine and shoe shine. We work at both ends. Fantastic. Why not have your head cut and your shoe shine? Barber's shop. We also sell bicycle parts. Happens to be the brother was a hair cutter and his other brother was a bicycle fixer, and they joined the shop and they created their own things in that sense. And then there was this wonderful one which was Wally the Undertaker, with a last to let you down. Crazy stuff. Anyway, the one that stopped us, that I had to stop and I had to talk to the guy, was the sustainable barber shop. What the heck is a sustainable barber shop? And I half expected that the guy would have solar powered razors and recycled grey water and a copy of the brand report on his desk maybe. And so we went in as we were part of our thing and said, well, is this a sustainable barber shop? And the guy had never been asked this question before. He thought for a minute and went, well, you know what? When my customers come in, I cut just enough hair so they're satisfied, but not too much, so they come back sooner than later. And I thought that's the best definition of sustainability. This is not a guy who's trying to save the world, he was trying to save himself. Thank you very much.